Okay, Ji, let's formally get started for today. So we'll now be looking at some new concepts which are related to inheritance. So let's get started. So today we'll be starting our discussion with something that we did not discuss yesterday, right? And that was basically when you are doing inheritance. So we know that we have a child class and a parent class. For example, in this case, this point is your parent class, okay, and this is your child class, okay. So the idea is that when you are doing inheritance, the data and the functions of the parent, they are inherited by the child class, so you do not need to repeat them again in the child class, right? So for example, when we are making the class point 3D, so we know that a 3D point has three data members x, y, and z. So it will get x and y from the parent, and we only have to write z here, right? Similarly, it will get these set x, set y, get x, get y functions from the parent, and we only need to write functions to set and get value of c, right? So the key idea of inheritance was that we are able to reuse a lot of, you can say, code from the parent class, okay? So the syntax for inheritance was that whenever you create a class, you put a colon, and then you write the name of the parent class, right? So this is the name of the parent class, and before it we use an access specifier, okay. So all the examples we have done so far, so yesterday I told you that in the beginning we'll be writing public here, but we'll later on discuss that what is actually the impact of this, right? And what you are writing here is actually called the type of inheritance, right? So after the colon, okay, if you are writing public, so we call it public inheritance. If you write it private, you will call it private inheritance, and similarly protected inheritance, okay. So although practically maybe almost 90-95% of the time you will always be writing public here, right? Almost always. But still, since theoretically we are allowed to write private here as well in some situation, so we will discuss what is it and what will happen if I change it from public to protected or private, right? But having said that, please do remember that when you will be making programs, so almost always you will be writing public here, right? But anyways, let's discuss that what will be the impact of changing this type of inheritance, right? So you see, we agree that with inheritance, the data members and the member functions of the parent class are inherited. Okay, so it means they will become a part of the child class. But we did not discuss that when it becomes a part of the child class, right? So whether they will be a private member, public member, or protected member in the child class. So what I'm trying to say is that you see, for example, X and Y are protected in the parent class. Okay, we can see x and y are protected in the point class. When we do inheritance, we say, okay, now they are a member of child class, okay, they have been inherited. But after inheritance, this x and y which you see here, whether they will go in this private part or public part or protected part, okay, this is something that we did not discuss, right? And similarly, if something is public in the parent class, again, we have the same question that when it becomes a part of the child class, whether these functions which were public, whether they should go to this private part or public part or protected part. Okay, so this is something that we'll be discussing. Okay, so who will determine this? The type of inheritance will determine it, right? And type of inheritance is what you are writing after this column. Okay, so let's discuss it in detail and see that what will actually happen. Okay, so you see, once suppose you have one class like this is your parent class and this is your child class. Okay, and inheritance is represented by an arrow which is pointing from child to parent. Okay, and you have something maybe here in the private, something is public, and something is protected. Okay, means you have all the you can say possible combinations. Okay, now what we do is we say, okay, Suppose when I'm making the child class, so after the colon, I am writing public. Okay, so let's discuss what will happen in that case. Similarly, I have another choice. After the colon, I can also write private, and after the colon, I can also write protected. Okay, so this is what we are writing after the colon. Means this is the type of inheritance. Okay, so in order to understand this, let's take an example that suppose you have these goggles. Okay, so the child class is looking at the parent class through these goggles. Now let's assume that I paint them yellow. Okay, so you are wearing goggles and you paint yellow, so everything would appear yellow to you, right? Because you are looking through goggles which have been painted yellow, right? Similarly, now suppose I have another you can say pair, and if I paint it with a different color, okay, so whatever you see, you will see that color. Okay, so instead of maybe yellow, if I make it red, say, okay, so what will happen now? Everything will appear red to you. Now, in this case, you have to take the same example that when we are doing public inheritance, the child class is looking to the parent class through goggles which are painted with public. Just for understanding, you can take this example, right? Similarly, when the type of inheritance is private, so you can think of it as the child class is looking at the parent class through eyes or through goggles which are painted private, right? And same goes for protected. Just for understanding, just keep this in mind, and then I actually explain in detail. So it means now we can have total 9 different combinations. Okay, and what do I mean by that? That you see the type of inheritance can be public, it can be protected, and it can be private. And type of inheritance, just to remind you, is what you are writing after the colon. Type of inheritance means what you are writing after the colon. Okay, so we have 3 possibilities here. Similarly, in the parent class, okay, in the parent class, you can write public. Something can be public in the parent class, something can be protected, and something can be private. So you see, there can be these 9 different combinations. Now let's discuss these one by one. So basically, all the examples we have done so far, it was actually this column. Okay, because after the colon, we were always writing public. Okay, so you can assume that in the previous lecture, all the examples of inheritance we were doing, they were actually falling in this first column of this table. Okay. Now what happens is that if the type of inheritance is public, okay, means after the colon you are writing public, and this was actually in the parent class. So whatever was public in the parent class, in the child class, it will always also be public. Okay, because the child is looking at the parent through these goggles. Okay, whatever was protected, it will stay protected, and whatever is private, it will stay private. So you see, there is no change. Means when the type of inheritance is public, whatever was public in the parent stays public, whatever was protected, it stays protected, and whatever was private stays private. So you see, it's fairly simple. I'll also explain you through code, right? But let me just complete this table. Even if you have some confusion, when I explain to you through the example, I hope they will be addressed, right? So just let me complete this table and link it with the code, and then maybe we can discuss. Okay. Now let's come to this column. Okay. Suppose after the colon you write private, which I already told you is rare, but let's discuss what will happen if we do so. Okay. Now you see, the child class is looking at the parent class through the eyes of private. Means this private is very restrictive, so everything will appear private to the child class. In other words, just I gave you an example that if you are wearing goggles, you paint them yellow, so everything will appear yellow to you, right? Because you are looking through a glass which is painted yellow. Same is the case here. After the colon, you put private, so this public will also appear private to you. You means child class. this protected, it will also become a private part of that, and private, of course, it always stay private. There's no debate about it, right? So now you see, when the type of inheritance was private, anything which was public in the parent class, when it comes to the child class, it becomes private. Protected also becomes private, and we all already know that private always stays private. We cannot change it, right? And similarly, you can guess for the third one, right? That now, if the type of inheritance is protected, which again is rare. So since you are looking at everything through the eyes of protected, so public will become protected. Protected is already protected, and since private is has higher restriction than protected, so it will remain private. So now you see, this is a complete, you can say, 9 combinations, that what will happen to each type of data or functions in the parent class by changing the type of inheritance. Okay, so let me explain. I understand it is not very easy to follow, so I will explain it further, but this time through an example, right? So this is the table we made, right? I'll just repeat it again. So mostly we are dealing with this, okay, almost more than 90% of the time, right? So if the type of inheritance is public, private will remain private, okay, protected will remain protected, public will remain protected. Public means there is no change. If the type of inheritance is private, so everything will become private, it makes sense. And if the type of inheritance is protected, private will stay private, protected will stay protected, but public will also become protected. Okay. Now let's see what does this table actually mean. Okay, by 3 different examples. Okay, now let's see what is going on here. The type of inheritance is public, and we just discussed what happens with public inheritance. You don't change anything. Okay, so these x and y, they were protected in the parent class. When they go to the child class, so in the child class they are also protected. Okay, because we just discussed that when you are using public inheritance, nothing changes. Sorry. Okay, similarly, these functions were public in the parent class. When they go to the child class, they will become a public member of this class. Okay, so it means with public inheritance, now you can see x and y, when they are inherited, they become protected member because they were protected in the parent. Similarly, when these functions are inherited, these 4 functions, since they were public in the parent, so when they come to the child class, they also become a public member. Okay, so this is basically the description. Now let's change this public to maybe protected. Okay, now you see the type of inheritance is protected. So you know, with protected, what happens? Protected will stay protected, but public will also become protected. Now this child class is looking at the parent class through these goggles, which are painted protected. Okay, so what will happen? Protected will become a protected member of this class, and all of these functions which were actually public in the parent class, when they come in this child class, they will become protected. Now you see what will happen now. When you will create an object of child class, you will not be able to call these functions. Why? Because from the main we cannot call you access protected. So you see the impact that this is having is not on the child class, but it will have more impact on what you can access from the main and what you cannot access. So you see, you have straight away, you can say an example where functions were public in the parent class. Okay, set x, set y, get y. But when the type of inheritance is protected, they become a part of the child class, but now they are a protected member of the child class. So it means from the main, if you create an object of point 3D, you would not be able to call these functions, right? So that's why you can guess that why we commonly don't use it. Because if you are using protected inheritance, then how will you call these functions from the main, right? This is the key reason that I told you that mostly you will be using public inheritance. Now let's see the third example. In the third example, what do we have? Now we are using the private inheritance. So what will happen now? Everything in the parent class which is inherited, it will become a private member of the child class row. So you see, these x and y, they were protected. But since the type of inheritance is private, so when they become a part of child class, they are here. They are in the private section. Okay. Similarly, when all of these functions are inherited, again, they are private in the child class. So you will again have the same situation that when you create an object of point 3D in the main, you will not be able to call these functions because now they are the private functions of this class point 3D. Okay, one important thing is, which I show you on the next slide. If you change this type of inheritance, right, then what child class can access it, there is no change, right? It stays the same. Whatever is the type of inheritance, child class can always access public and protected members, right? Means after the colon, no matter what you write, a rule for the child class is that child class can access public and protected, child class cannot access private. So this rule will always hold, whether it's public inheritance, private inheritance, or protected inheritance. Then what will be the impact? The impact will be when you are creating objects of child class in the main. Okay, there you will have an impact. And another possibility which I'll show you later is that if you are doing inheritance like this, okay, you have a parent class, a child class, and another child class. Okay, so it is possible that something was public here, but you use private inheritance, so in this class it will become private. So if it's something is private here, then this child class will not be able to access. So you see, changing the type of inheritance, it will have impact when you create objects in the child class in the main, or you have another child class, because then it will not be able to access something that was private, right? Okay, now let's maybe do one more example of this, right? So that we develop a good understanding. So maybe I can I can just take a class, any class, say I call it A. And within this class, what we do, we take one data of every type, right? We say X is private, and then we take a protected data member, we call it Y, and we also take a public data member, we call it Z. Okay, although we always stress that data should not be public, but since here in this example our objective is just to study what can be accessed and what cannot be accessed, so that's why I'm taking Z as public data member, right? But you already know that we should not take public data members, right? Okay, now we write class B, public A. Okay, and in this I just make a function, so I write public, say F, and within this function what I will do, I'll try to access cout X, cout Y, and cout Z. Okay, now maybe let's discuss. Okay, so can you tell me quickly which of these in the current form is valid and which is invalid out of these three statements? You can just quickly let me know. Yes, please. Which of these is valid statement and which is invalid? Private is invalid. Yes, cout X is invalid, right? Because we cannot access this, and these two are okay. Okay, so this we already know. Now suppose instead of public, I write private here. Now can you tell me what will change? In this case, do we still have the same situation or something will change? What do you think? Please let me know. Okay, one suggestion is cout X is invalid. Another suggestion is that all three are invalid. And another suggestion is that cout X is invalid. Okay, now let me just explain. You see, by making it private within the child class, nothing will change. Still, this is invalid. Rest two are okay. Okay, so when you are changing the type of inheritance, you must keep in mind that what you can access from the child class, it will not change. Okay, this is very important. So it means whether I write private here or public here or protected here, in all three cases, you cannot access private data, you can access public and protected. Okay, this is very, very important. That's why I intentionally made this example, because when we change the type of inheritance to private, so many, it is very common to have a confusion that now we cannot access anything, right? So that's why I'm stressing again and again, when you keep it public or private or protected, these three will have exactly the same behavior, means nothing will change here. When I say nothing will change, what do I mean? From the child class, private cannot be accessed, protected and public can be accessed. And this rule holds whether the type of inheritance is public or private or protected. This rule will not change, right? So this is very important. That's why I actually did this example. So please be careful. Whatever you write as type of inheritance, child class can always access public and protected, and child class can never access private. Okay, it is not dependent on the type of inheritance. Then you must be thinking, then how this will impact. So let's see where we'll have an impact. Okay, means changing the type of inheritance, what actually will change. Okay, so on this we agree. Now we go to the main. I create an object of child class B, and let's call it small b. And now I will write cout b dot x, cout b dot y, cout b dot z. Yes, can now you tell me which of these are valid? And I'm talking about the main. Okay, so which of these three statements are valid and which will give me an error? Just think and let me know. Okay, one suggestion is b dot z. Yes, b dot z is correct, but there is something else as well. X and y. Okay, one suggestion is x and y, one is z. So mostly the suggestion is z. Let's just discuss. Okay, um, you see what we said, that from the main, what we can access, what we cannot access. From the main, we can always access something that is public. We cannot access anything which is private or protected. This is a general rule we know. Okay, so now you see, let's see very carefully. The type of inheritance is public. Okay, so it means this x will be a part of this class, y will be a part of this class, z will be a part of this class. What will be this x in the child class? X will be private, y will be protected, z will be public, right? Means whatever you had in the parent class, you just copy it as it is in the child class. So can we access private from the main? No. So it means this is not allowed. Can we access public from, sorry, protected from the main? No, this is not allowed. Can we access public from the main? Yes, we can. So only the last statement is true. X and Y cannot be accessed, right? So this is very important, that you see, this is not a new rule. This is the rule we know from always, that from the main, with dot operator, you can only access public, right? So protected is not accessible, private is not accessible. When you are doing inheritance, class B is a child class. It inherited everything from the parent class, X, Y, and Z. We were using public inheritance. It means in this class B, X is private, Y is protected, Z is public. Okay, so it means only public can be accessed, so only Z can be accessed. Protected and private cannot be accessed, right? So this is slightly tricky. So if you have some confusion related to this, please tell me, and then I will move to the next example where I will change this public, right? So if there's any confusion, please do let me know. Okay, so that we can discuss it, and then we'll move to the next example. Okay, let's see this visually. Okay, maybe I can make this one class which is parent. and this class which is child, or I'll also need a space for the main. So let me just redraw them so that I get some space for the main. Okay, so this is our parent class. Maybe this is our child class, and this is our main. Okay, and I call it, say, class A. Okay, we call it class B and public A. Okay, means we are doing public inheritance. Okay, and this is our main. Right. So in class A, I have three sections: private, protected, and public. For some time, let's forget about the child class. Okay, first we need to recall that what was happening before inheritance. Okay, if there is no inheritance, still we can have a class which is like int x, int y, and int z. Okay, let's ignore this for the time being. Let's assume there is no class B. Let's directly come to the main. So in the main, I write this. Okay, and I try to access a dot x, a dot y, a dot z. Now tell me which of these is legal and which is illegal. I'm not doing any inheritance. Okay, there is no B for the time being. Now tell me, then we proceed. Okay, a dot z is legal. Yes, a dot z is legal, and rest two are not legal. Right. So this we know already, that whether there is inheritance or no inheritance. Okay, you see, it is not dependent on inheritance. Whether you are doing inheritance or no inheritance, private cannot be accessed from the main, protected cannot be accessed from the main, only public can be accessed. This we know from day one. Okay, so means it has nothing to do with inheritance. This you keep in mind. Okay, so what do you keep in mind? Public can be accessed from the main, protected and private cannot be accessed. Agreed? So we agree on this. Okay. Now we'll come back to this later. Now let's introduce this child class. Okay. So this B, which is a child class, we are doing inheritance. Okay. So it means I'll just make private, protected, and public. Okay. Suppose there is also a function in this class. Okay, maybe somewhere here. This is a function. Okay. Now you tell me this function can access which data of parent class, means out of x, y, and z, which of these three the function can access. Function is in the child class. Now let's first answer me this and then we move forward. Okay. Yes, I think all of you are able to guess. Protected and public. Very good. It means it can access y and z. Okay. That we also know. Okay. Y and z. Yes. So I think all of you are convinced that x cannot be accessed and y and z can be accessed. X is not allowed. Y and z are allowed. Okay. So we agree on this as well, right? So now we agree on two things. I'll just recall. We agreed that from the main you can only access public, you cannot access private and protected. And we agreed, you told me, I did not tell you, that from the child class we can access protected and public, we cannot access private. Okay, so this is what you are telling me. So I assume that you are getting the idea. Now pay attention. Now suppose I change this type of inheritance from public to private. Okay, so now will something change here in the function f? You just have to say yes or no. What do you think? I am changing the type from private to public. Will something change in the function? No, nothing will change, right? Similarly, I write public here, private here, or protected here. Nothing will change in this function. When I say nothing will change, what does it mean? You can always access protected and public from the child class. You cannot access private. So it means this rule is actually not dependent on this. Okay, in other words, when I'm saying nothing is changing, so it means type of inheritance is not influencing what you can access from the child class. Means it is totally, you can say, independent. Whether you write public here, protected here, private here, child class can always access public and protected data of the parent, and it cannot access private data. So it means type of inheritance से child class को कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ेगा, आसान words में. Agreed? So do you agree with this? Okay. Now let's say फिर फर्क कहाँ पड़ेगा? Okay, then you might be thinking if nothing is changing, so where the difference will come. So let's see now where the difference will come. Okay, since we agreed on this, so I'll just remove it. Okay, to get some space. Okay, and I'll also maybe remove this. We'll come back to this later. Okay, now let's see that when we are doing inheritance, okay, so we always say that data is inherited. Okay, so when you are writing public here, so what will happen? When this Y was protected, it will become a protected member of class B. When Z was public, it will become a public member of class Z. And this X, you can assume it is a private member of this class. Okay, although you cannot access it, we agreed, but I have just written it just for understanding. Okay, of course this class cannot access it, right? Parent ka private access nahi ho sakta, but just for discussion I'm writing here for completeness. Okay, so when you are using public inheritance, whatever is private in the parent remains private in the child. Whatever is protected in the parent, it comes to the child class in the protected section. Whatever was public, it comes to the public section. Okay, now we already agreed that within the class nothing will change. Now come to the main. Now can you tell me, instead of A, because A we have already discussed, now I will make an object of class B, and now I will write B dot X, B dot Y, and B dot Z. Now you can tell me what you can access and what you cannot access for object B. Just look at the class B, the middle box. B dot Z can be accessed. Yes, Z. Okay. So now you see, almost everyone is saying that this should be accessible and these two should not be accessible. Yes, it is very much correct, right? Why it is correct? Just look at this. You already told me that from the main we can only access public. So out of these three, what is public? Only Z is public. So that's why B dot Z can be accessed. Okay, and these two cannot be accessed. Okay, so we agree on this till here. Now I'm going to change something. Okay, now what I will do, instead of public here, now I will write private here. Okay, and now what will happen? Let's see. Since you are doing private inheritance, so when you inherit things from the parent class, where will they go? They all will become a private member of the child class. Now you see, what was public in the parent is now private in the child. Okay, means class B. What was protected in the parent, now it is private in the child. And this X was already private. Now can you tell me what will happen now from the main? Now just think and tell me now what will happen. Okay, one suggestion is nothing can be accessed. All three are invalid. Yes, very good. You see, now since X, Y, and Z all have become private, so this is invalid, this is invalid, this is invalid. Nothing can be accessed now. Okay. Previously we were able to access this Z. So now you see, फर्क कहाँ पे पड़ा इसको change करने से? Difference is here. Previously you were saying it is legal. Now you are saying this is also illegal. In other words, whatever was public in the parent, which was Z. With public inheritance, we were able to access it from the main. Okay. But when you use private inheritance, you were not even able to access Z, which was public in the parent, because in the child it has become private. And now you should also tell me what will happen if I make it protected. Out of these three, now what will happen? Just guess and tell me. When I make it protected, let's see what will happen. Let me just write it. Okay, so when the inheritance is protected, okay, so X will be private in the child, Y will be protected, and this Z will also be protected. Okay, now I have made it easier for you. Maybe now you can guess what out of the three statements in the main, B dot X, B dot Y, B dot Z. Now can you tell me which of these can be accessed? Yes, very good. All are invalid actually. You see why? X was private, you cannot access private. Y and Z are protected. And the first thing you told me when we started this discussion was that from the main you cannot access protected or private. So X is private, Y and Z are protected. So you cannot access any of the three. Right. So it means whether you are writing protected or private, you are actually not able to access Z in both the cases. You are able to access Z only when you are doing public inheritance. Right. So none of these is accessible. Okay, now I hope I still understand. Maybe you did not get it 100%, but with some more example, I'm sure you will get the idea. And please don't worry about it much because, as I told you, that practically when you are making programs, mostly you will be always doing public inheritance. Okay, but this is something that is uh, that is that is a support that is provided by the compilers. That's why we are discussing. It's a very low level detail, but it's good that you should know it, right? But when you are actually making programs to solve a real world problem, most of the time, almost always, the inheritance would be public, right? So don't worry too much about it. But still, it's a good idea that you know how things work. Okay, now let me show you the same example here. Okay, I think it's the same example. Rather than X, Y, and Z, we just have different variable names. Okay, so we have you see three integers. One is public data, private data, and protected data, right? We have a child class, okay, and the type of inheritance is public. In the child class, we have a function which is trying to access all three. Now, we already know from child class, you cannot access private, you can only access protected and public. Okay, so what will happen? In this case, this first statement is actually incorrect and the rest two are okay. Next, I asked you that what will happen if I change it to private, and I have still the same thing. Okay, so we discussed that when you change the type of inheritance, nothing will change here. Okay, means within the child class, the rule stays the same. That child class cannot access private data. Child class can only access, you can say, protected and public data, right? So this is so important that I have highlighted it, right? Type of inheritance does not affect how child class can access the members, right? Protected and public can be accessed, private cannot be accessed. So whatever you write here, it will not change anything in the child class. Okay, it will change where it will change, as you saw, when you are making objects of classes in the main, right? So now you see, this is the example we did, that when we were using public inheritance, so what was happening? If you remember, you said X and Y are not accessible. We just have different variables name, but Z was accessible because it was public. But when we change the inheritance to private, so if you remember, you said X, Y, Z, nothing can be accessed. Okay, so this is basically where things are changing. So again, with public inheritance, what happens? Functions in the derived class can access public and protected data of the class. An object of child class can access only the public members of the parent class, right? This is what we did with an example. So we are trying to actually generalize or conclude. And once you are doing private inheritance or even protected inheritance, so what will happen? That when you are doing private inheritance, so even something that was public, you will not be able to access it. Okay, just remember that Z was public in the parent class, but we were still not able to access it because when you did private inheritance, it became a private data member of the child class, right? So maybe if you still have some queries related to this, maybe we can discuss those before looking at the next example. Okay, now let's quickly see a different scenario, right? So far we were talking about a parent class and a child class and the main class. So let's just now I'll again be making three boxes, but now the third box is actually not main, it is another class. Okay, so maybe I can just introduce this idea and we can complete it maybe in the next lecture. So this is your class A, this is your class B, public A, and this is your class C, public B. Now what are we saying? B is child of A, okay, and C is child of B. It is something like this. Okay, now maybe what I can do, private, public. Okay, let me write protected first so that we go in the logical order. Okay, so private and then protected, and finally we have public. Similarly, private, protected, and public. And same thing here, private, protected, and public. And here I make a function, maybe void f, which is trying to access something. Okay, let me just write something here. I'll not write int, you can assume these are integers, x, y, z. Okay, x, y, z. Can someone tell me now which of these three are allowed and which are not allowed? When I'm writing x, y, z, I'm trying to access. Okay, you can assume I'm doing cout. Just think over it and then we discuss. Okay, one suggestion is y and z can be accessed. Y and z allowed. Okay, x is invalid. Yes, so I think all of you are saying the same thing. Let's see it stepwise. Okay, and that how it is happening. X is private, y is protected here, z is public. Okay, similarly, now when you are trying to access the data of the parent, okay, so you see y is protected, z is public, x is private. So private cannot be accessed, protected and public can be accessed. Okay, it is exactly the same rule. The only thing is that now I have just a parent, a child, and a grandchild. Okay, so nothing else is changing. Um, child can access protected and public of parent. It cannot access private. Okay, so this is just one thing. Okay, I'll just introduce you to something. Okay, but we'll do it next time. I'll just let you think over it so that when you come next time, we have something to discuss. Let me just do it. Okay, yeah. So for the next time, you just think, okay, I'll explain you next time. When I do this, now can you tell me what will happen? Just think and tell me. Otherwise, I will discuss in detail in the next lecture. If you can just quickly guess and tell me what will happen now. Okay, one suggestion is XYZ all are invalid. All are invalid. Yes, very good, right? You see what will happen? We are doing private inheritance, so all of these three, they are inherited, but now they are private members of this B. So when I am in class C, I am trying to access private data of the parent, which is not allowed. So you see, I'll do it next time as well. Don't worry if you did not get the idea right. I'll revise it in the next lecture as well. But the thing is that when you are changing the type of inheritance, you can have the influence in the main. This is what the examples we saw previously. And if you have another child class, means child also has a child class, then of course things will also change, right? So now you see what you can do. If you are making a child class, okay, and you write private here, then it means you are restricting anyone from using your class. Okay, maybe they can do inheritance, but they will not be able to access your data. Okay, so that's why private is used only in special scenarios where you don't want someone else to make a child class and then access your data, right? Because if you make a class, you make it publicly available, anyone can make a child class from your class, right? So everything that was protected, it can be accessed. So if you want to restrict it, then you can use private inheritance, right? So I think we'll stop for today. Let me just see if there are some queries, and then we